I know someone else was very excited. Promised you we would get CJ Vogel from On Texas Football to join us, and he has live from the Manning Passing Academy. CJ, what's up, man? How you doing? And thanks for stopping by.
Cam, how's it going? It's hot, toasty, sweaty, muggy, any adjective you could think of to describe just a nasty weather out here in New Orleans or in Thibodaux, Louisiana, but it's part of the fun.
That sounds like Louisiana. Hot, humid, muggy. That's all words I would use to describe that state. Okay, day 2 of the Manning Passing Academy, and so far, what has stood out to you?
Yeah, so the college counselors, the campers, the big quarterbacks, they'll be throwing competition style tonight a little bit. Really excited to see that. Of course, Arch Manning, one of the big headliners out here this weekend, names on the camp. But there's been some arms that have surprised me. I thought Austin Simmons from Ole Miss, seeing him work with Eli and Peyton on Friday was really encouraged, on Thursday. He's a name that maybe I didn't have much expectation about or knew much about for him coming into this camp, but he's expected to put up some big-time numbers in that Ole Miss offense. Getting to see Cade Klubnik again in person, Lenore Sellers in person. Those guys, they're touted highly for a reason. They got mock drafts claiming them to be a top quarterback in the country for a reason. They look good on air, and that, I know it sounds like an easy thing to do, but you'd be surprised how many balls hit the ground in these throwing sessions. So all in all, the guys that you expect to be big-name quarterbacks, they're here this weekend. It's been fun to watch them throw.
And Arch will throw, you say, tomorrow or Sunday? How does the format work for the Manning Passing Academy?
Yeah, so Friday the campers got in, the college counselors got in, and there's kind of an optional workout opportunity with Peyton and Eli kind of leading some of the quarterback drills, kind of showcasing that to the campers and what they will go through over the next 2 days as well. Friday night tonight, there will be a big under the lights throwing session with all the college campers in attendance to watch the quarterbacks kind of put on a show, throw comebacks, curls, stops, posts, goes, anything under the sun. It's a pretty exciting event for those campers, but for me in the media, you get to see how the arms stack up with one another in the world of college football. And so that'll be tonight. Hopefully Arch Manning will be participating because he did not throw yesterday, hopefully saving that arm for the season and tonight as well.
Big recruiting day on the Texas football front. You have 3 guys: Malachi Lee, the defensive tackle, Chase Calicut, the DB, and Damari Simeon, defensive tackle. All 3 were scheduled to announce their decisions. I believe Chase, no surprise, just committed to Georgia. I think we're expecting Malachi Lee to also commit to Michigan. How did you think losing these 3 recruits? I don't know if I've seen Simeon commit yet or Lee, but it's trending not Texas's way. I don't know if either of those 3 were really surprising going into the day, but how do you expect this to impact the 2026 class? And do you see anybody else that Texas might pivot to going forward?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Because you had 3 today. You have about 16 over the next, 2.5 weeks, right? So there's all sorts of commitments coming up, a big run in recruiting for Texas. 3 today. You're 0 for 1 right now. Malachi Lee set to decide. Damari Simeon still set to decide. It's likely now that you're going to go 0 for 3 today. It's unfortunate. Texas hosted all 3 for official visits. Texas has been in on these recruitments for quite a while. But look at where you're recruiting these guys from, right? You're recruiting against Georgia, recruiting against Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan for Malachi Lee, recruiting against Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State for Damari Simeon. All of these schools very much in that conversation for the best programs in the country. So I think Texas is in on the right guys. I think that there are still a number of guys leaning in their direction. But yeah, Damari Simeon choosing to stay closer to home up north. He's from New Jersey. And Malachi Lee coming down to Texas and Michigan. We'll see where that ends up. But right now, 0 for 3 feels likely for the Longhorns.
And yesterday, Xavier Kroll, the top remaining running back in the class, committed to Alabama. Not really a surprise, but the deeper picture here, CJ, is Texas still without a running back commitment for the 2026 class. I mean, 6 of the top 13 running backs are committed to 3 programs: A&M, Notre Dame, and USC. Hello on NIL money. Are you concerned with how the running back room is looking in this 2026 class? Obviously, James Simon, we've heard a lot of good things about him, the freshman from the 25 class. But again, I can't think about all the injuries Texas sustained this last season. One running back coming in this last class. 0 so far committed. And obviously, there's the transfer portal that can, fill these holes. I'm sure Sark and Chad Scott would not like to have to use a transfer portal. But overall, what is your concern level with the way the running back class is shaping up in 2026? With still, obviously a lot of time to go until signing day.
Yeah, concern level for running back at Texas, very low. Concern level for this 2026 class, it might be a little bit higher. Now, we've seen Texas miss on top prospects previously, right? Ruben Owens, Micah Hudson, two in-state guys who were heavily considering Texas at the time, but end up with pretty darn good players, right? Ryan Wingo came of the miss of Micah Hudson. C.J. Baxter came of the miss of Ruben Owens. So I trust that Texas will find the guys that are going to be running around in DKR over the next 4 years. Running back should never be an issue at the University of Texas when it comes to finding, recruiting, and developing the top guys in the country. They've hit a bit of a wall, but again, this same wall that we experience or are experiencing right now with Texas recruiting at running back in 2026, we saw 2025 at defensive line. Right, you got to get these coaches acclimated to the job, build those relationships, and then just essentially time to win these big recruitments. It's been a bit of a tough start for Chad Scott, but ultimately the running back spot at Texas should recruit itself.
Yeah, and the timing is really unfortunate because Kroll, who had a really good relationship with Tashard Choice, if Choice stays as a running back coach instead of going to Detroit, I think he ends up at Texas. Obviously, a brand new coach comes in. It's tough to develop a relationship like that on the fly. And that's a great point bringing about Kenny Baker. When Bo Davis left for LSU, it's the same thing. He had all these relationships with these recruits. All of a sudden, a new coach comes in, who's in the Dolphins, Western Kentucky, not a lot of relationships there. Now you get a year in, like Kenny Baker did. You have a guy like Alfred Collins go in the second round. You see what all these guys did, a fantastic defensive line, the way they used the transfer portal. And all of a sudden now Kenny Baker, I think you could name the month of June the Kenny Baker month because he had 4 commits in the month of June, including Richard Wesley. How impressive was the month of June for Kenny Baker and PK and what Texas was able to do in the recruiting trail? So it's still a couple more guys that may be ending up committing to Texas over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, you love what that defensive line's looking like. And again, look at where all these kids are coming in from. Dylan Berryman, Louisiana, Corey Wells, Mississippi, Vodney Cleveland, Alabama. Those are all SEC territory guys on the defensive line, which, as we've seen over the last 20 years in college football, that's where you want your inside guys hailing from. They move differently. They develop differently. They look different whenever they are through with their college football. So I think Texas has done a great job, and they're still leading for Kendall Gerville out of Fort Myers, Florida. James Johnson on Miami Northwestern has a decision between Georgia, Texas, Florida, Miami as well. Texas could take up to 5 on the defensive line this cycle. But you mentioned Richard Wesley. I don't know if there's a recruit that resembles Colin Simmons as closely as Richard Wesley. And this is a guy, again, who skipped or is going to skip his junior year to become a senior this fall and then enroll early. So essentially skipping a year and a half of high school development, but he looks the part, 6'4", 6'4.5", 240 pounds, lightning quick off the edge and violent. My goodness, is he violent at this age, this early. He can come in, sit a year behind Colin Simmons and then take over that edge spot there for the Longhorns, and Texas not see much of drop off at all.
We talked about the handful of recruits that will be announcing their commitments next couple weeks. How different do you think this class is going to look like, say, come August 1st? And what players are you expecting to possibly end up announcing their decision to commit to Texas here in a very, very busy month of July?
Yeah, I don't want to say the class will be done by the end of July, but you're certainly going to have about 75, 80% of it complete. And again, Texas has done a great job of going back to recruitments that they previously had lost out on and working flips, right? That flipmas term that we've heard, Sark after dark, that's really when they do a lot of the work to put the bow on the class. But, by the end of July, I think you'll be up to about 22 commits probably, right? You're at 15 right now. You'll probably, 15 now plus, and 3 of which are specialists. So essentially 12 commits currently position-wise. I think you get up to about 22. And the 2 that I'm really eyeing on the offensive line, John Turntine out of North Crowley, Felix Ojo out of Mansfield Lake Ridge. Both, I would be very surprised if they did not end up at Texas, given what we know about their recruitments and the way that the month of June has trended for them. If either of them end up anywhere but Texas, I'd be a bit surprised.
247 has Texas as number 10 in the class right now. I think On3 Rivals at 13. Do you think Texas, let me ask you this. Where do you think Texas, when it's all said and done, will end up in the recruiting rankings after this class is filled up? I know it's only, June 27th, but where do you see Texas ending up?
It'll be a top 3 class. It's just too top heavy when you consider some of the guys that Texas is leading for. Kendall Gerville, I mentioned him out of Fort Myers. Texas has him, or he has Texas as his number 1 school. I mentioned the 2 offensive linemen. Texas still needs to add a wide receiver, whether that's a Jalen Lott, whether that's a Caden Finley. We'll see, but you have a 5-star in Dia Bell. You've got a 5-star in Richard Wesley. You got a borderline 5-star in Jermaine Bishop already in the class. And I mentioned it, but you only have 12. There are other schools with 15, 18. Shoot, USC has 30 commits already. By the time that Texas fills out its class, it will be in the top 3 nationally.
You put out a tweet a couple days ago, CJ Vogel _OTF, ranking your positional rooms for the 2025 Texas Longhorns football team. Take us through this list here, because I think based off the Twitter replies, you got a couple people maybe surprised, but of course, I thought your rankings were pretty spot on. Take us through I don't want to spoil them for you right now, let you go through it, but take us through your rankings.
Yeah, well, we can get into where the controversy might have occurred. And look, I have running back at 10. And I don't think that's a bad room for Texas. I think it's as deep as we've seen a Texas running back room in a while, but it's just a lot of unknowns. How will a C.J. Baxter return from injury? How will a Christian Clark look after a torn Achilles? How will a Jarrett Gibson improve from a year in which the staff, quite frankly, couldn't trust him with the ball in his hands towards the back end of the year? You got a lot of bodies. You don't have a lot of answers. And I think that's where that room kind of stands out to me amongst the rest. At every other position, you have a starting 5-star who was on the field last year, or you have a starting returning, all-conference or all-American that was on the field last year. You don't have that at the running back room. C.J. Baxter, yes, a previous 5-star, wasn't on the field at all last year, returning from an injury that was beyond just the ACL, but the PCL and the LCL. So that changes things, right? I want to see how he returns fully. I want to see what he looks like again. And to be quite frank and honest about Trey Wisner, look, he's a 1,000-yard running back in the SEC a year ago. That's good. Returning those are very rare in the game of college football. But do I think that there's a room right now that's lesser talent-wise or expectation-wise, given what we know about them in that room right now? I would say no. The one that I think is perhaps a little close is tight end, but Jack Andrews went for about 550 last year at Cal as one of the top returning guys in the country at tight end. We like what we hear about Jordan Washington coming into his own going into year 2. And Nick Townsend, a borderline 5-star guy out of Decaney last year. That room is as healthy and as deep as we've ever seen it, even with those years with Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm on the roster together. I think this could be in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we look back and say, the 2025 Texas tight end room could be the best that we've seen maybe ever.
Yeah, we've heard Sark talk about Jordan Washington and Spencer Shannon for a couple years now. Now, can we see them put it on the football field, right? In the running back room too. I understand the 10 ranking just because of all the injuries to what CJ and Christian Clark this past season, on only 2 running backs coming in, James Simon and the 3-star Ricky Stewart. It's a room with a lot of questions. So yeah. I understand and I agree with your rankings there. Okay, last thing, because I know you want to get back to work. Are you all in on the Mavericks now with Cooper Flagg? Are you back in? Where are you at with Nico Harrison, the Mavericks?
First off, I don't want to go back to work, so keep stretching these questions out. I'm optimistic about the Mavs. It's hard not to be, right? Cooper Flagg, a generational prospect. I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but the first, American
born?
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. But from Maine, like if he's born in Maine, drafted by first overall, I'm excited for him. On paper, the Mavs have a very competitive roster. It's built for defense in the playoffs. It's built to be physical. But on top of that, you have guys that can go out and get their own bucket. The question is, will Kyrie return from injury to that level that we've seen from him during his stint in Dallas? That's obviously the big question. Who else does Dallas go out and target at that point guard spot? Is it a Dennis Schroeder, who I would love? Is it a Chris Paul, who I would absolutely loathe? It's going to be really interesting. But I do think that the Mavs are – and again, it's still ripe in my brain, that Luka trade. I don't want to completely forgive Nico for that, because that was just as egregious as any move I've ever seen in my sports watching career. But it's undeniable that fully healthy, that roster should be very competitive.
Without a doubt. I mean, how different would the outlook be if the Mavericks, say, had, the eighth pick and are rocking around with Jonas instead of Cooper Flag? We'll see. CJ, thanks so much for the time, man. I appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, and hopefully you can try and stay cool. I know it's almost impossible down there, but I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and happy Friday.